What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am excited to take one look at the Gardevoir EX deck profile. This has been a deck that has been a prominent force in the meta ever since the first Scarlet and Violet era set dropped in the Pokemon trading card game. This is the current modern format, so this is right before rotation. It'll be nice to take a look at what made this deck such a force to be reckoned with, and I am excited to talk about my version of the strategy. It is a little bit different than what you might see for absolute topping lists, but I just wanted to be able to create something that was fun to play. So I'm excited to hop into it, but before I do, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're fans of content like this. So without further ado, let's hop into it. So, of course, we have to start the Gardevoir deck profile by talking about the main card, and that is Gardevoir EX, a house of a Pokemon that has 310 HP, that has the Broken Psychic Embrace ability, which says as often as you like during your turn, you may attach a basic Psychic energy from your discard pile to one of your Psychic Pokemon, and if you attached energy to a Pokemon in that way, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon, and you cannot use this ability if doing so would knock out your own Pokemon. So what exactly is going on here? So the whole purpose of the deck is that you really don't mind the damage counters on some of your Pokemon, because the Pokemon you are playing will end up having attacks that end up having benefits because of the fact that they have those damage counters on them. It has a respectable 190 attack power for 2 psychic energy and 3 colorless, but most of the time it'll just be psychic energy that's on it. So that can easily put your opponent within 2-shot range regardless of whatever they are playing. So overall, a very, very strong card. Usually you just want to have this card sitting in the back while some of your other Pokemon that are able to abuse the ability of having a damage counter on them take center stage. So Gardevoir, just like in the games, is a very good supporting Pokemon, and that is why I am playing 3 copies of the top end. You really don't need the 4th, as there are not only ways to be able to recycle this from the discard pile, but you also, it's just a little bit bricky, and there are plenty of other Pokemon that are able to take up bench space, and you don't want to have like too many Gardevoir EXs on the bench. So let's go ahead and take a look at the other parts of the line, and of course, the middle stage being 4 copies of Kirlia. This is the specific 80 HP one that has the Refinement ability, which lets you discard a card to draw 2 cards. And this is really the glue that has helped make the deck consistent and a force in the meta, all because of that ability. And the reason why, because Regulation F is going to be rotated out, this deck will most likely end up suffering because of that loss in consistency. There are many times where you really just want to be able to have 2 or 3 of these Kirlia just kind of chilling on the bench, consistently giving you discard outlets and draws. The discarding is obviously great because you can put Psychic Energy in there, which you can then attach for free with a Gardevoir later down the line. So yeah, this is a card that once you really get multiples going and you are abusing the Refinement ability every single turn, you are going to be able to see all of the pieces that you need to be able to actually start going in on your opponent's Pokemon and taking them out one by one. So this is going to be a card that is sorely missed, and but there is a reason why it is so good, and Refinement is that reason. So 4 copies, at least while it's still around, is absolutely recommended. And then honestly, nothing special. 4 copies of Ralts. It does have the nice memory skip attack, which choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks, and essentially they won't be able to use that attack during the following turn. 99% of the time isn't going to come up, It's a bit fringe, but it's always good to have in your back pocket if the situation calls for it. But realistically, we're just using this to either go into your Curlias or cheat into your Gardevoir if needed. So for some of the other supporting Pokemon, I am choosing to play one copy of Mimikyu with the Safeguard ability that says you can prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's EX and Pokemon V. This is strong in walling out and providing stalling in a pinch if you need a little bit more time to get going. So Mimikyu always makes it so that your opponent is going to have to have some other answer in their back pocket that is not an EX or a V if they want to be able to take this out or use some of their precious resources like their Prime Catcher or their boss's orders just to be able to waste getting the Mimikyu out of the active slot. So one Mimikyu is great. We can add it back from the discard pile if needed or if it does just so happen to die. I'm also playing one copy of Fluttermane. It has Midnight Fluttering, which says as long as it's in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon have no abilities. But it does have a respectable 90 attack power in the Hex Curl, which for 3 colorless energy, which again, it'll most of the time just be Psychic. So you can use it as an alternate attacker just to be able to whittle down your opponent, do a bit of chip damage so that some of your other Pokemon can be able to knock it out. I'm playing one copy of Screamtail, which has the first attack is really nothing to write home about, but Roaring Scream is extremely strong because it says you can do 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So this is one of the few where you'll start to notice the trend on how we can utilize the damage counters that the Gardevoir is providing us in the most efficient way possible. So let's say we bring out our Screamtail and we start to attach the Psychic energy from the discard pile. This attack power will not only start to exponentially increase with the number of Psychic energies that are in your discard pile, but you will be able to snipe your opponent's bench Pokemon, which is the key part of this that really makes it a threat. So what's even greater is the fact that you can increase the HP threshold of this card by even more by using the Pokemon tool Bravery Charm to increase its HP by 50, allowing it to hold that much more damage counters to do even more damage. So having bench sniping capabilities in a deck like this can really be a pain because your opponent now has to respect that if they put anything on the bench that might be a little bit on the weaker side, your Screamtail can come out and actually take it out if needed. So definitely enjoy playing the one copy. I'm also playing one copy of Klefki with the Mischievous Lock ability, which says as long as it's in the active, basic Pokemon in play have no abilities. This is very matchup dependent, but can be a very, very large detriment to your opponent if they just so happen to be playing a deck that is centered around mostly basic Pokemon. So Klefki is nice to be able to have if I notice that I can take advantage of my opponent not having a wide arsenal or array of other Pokemon that are not basic. I'm also taking a copy of Cleffa, which has the Grasping Draw attack, which for no energy lets you draw until you have 7 cards in your hand. This is one of the cards that I want to be able to just kind of have in my bench and be able to pivot to in a pinch if I need to get access to card advantage. It also really doesn't feel all that bad having it in the active because it has free retreat. So a lot of the time, if something does die early on, I can go ahead and bring out the Cleffa. And if I just so happen to need the Grasping Draw attack, I can utilize it, or I could just end up swapping it onto the bench so that something else can take its place. And for one of the stars of the show, we are playing 2 copies of Drifloon, which has the notable Balloon Blast attack, which does 30 damage for each damage counter on this. So keep in mind that we can increase the HP threshold of this by 50. So that theoretically means that if you had 10 damage counters on this, you you are going to go ahead and do a ton of damage to your opponent. Being able to do 300 damage off of something like a basic is just absolutely unheard of. So yeah, I think that Drifloon has certainly earned its spot, because this is a Pokemon that is unexpectedly deadly and can do a ton of damage. So yeah, I recommend playing 2 copies in your deck at the bare minimum. And then I am playing the 1 Manaphy. I'm playing a lot of small Pokemon that can be hit on the bench and knocked out fairly easily. We don't want that from happening, so Manaphy is a nice contingency plan. So that is it for the Pokemon. Quite a lot of Pokemon, and that's one of the reasons why I honestly love this deck, is because of the wide array of different options at your disposal. Maybe some of these you can argue can be cut, and hey, that is certainly something that you can do. The only notable exclusion being the Monkey Dory, which is certainly a tech that has proven success. I tried to keep it as psychic oriented as possible, so honestly that's really the only reason I didn't end up playing it myself. So if you wanted to make it even more competitive, you can choose to play that, but the deck is going to end up having some of its key cards rotated anyway, so it might not be worth it to try and go out of your way to get those cards just to make it more competitive, when those cards won't really make or break the difference. So as for the items, we are playing 3 Buddy Buddy Poffin, which is the best +1 in the game by far. It says search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon with 70 HP or less and put them onto your bench. So, well, yeah, so 70 HP or less. So obviously there are going to be a few cards in which we will not have access to that ability, but I mean, come on. Most of your lower end cards are going to meet that Buddy Buddy Poffin threshold, and if it wasn't for how insanely consistent the deck is once we actually get the Curlia set up, that is the reason why we aren't playing 4, because we really just don't need it. We are also playing other search cards like the Nest Ball, which is really good at being able to find whatever basic you need, so that is able to search for some of the other cards that can't be searched off of your Buddy Buddy Poffin's effect, like the Screamtail or the Fluttermane. So Nest Ball is a nice addition to the deck. Again, the deck is very consistent, so you don't necessarily need 4. And same thing with the Ultra Ball. The reason that we are playing the Ultra Ball is because it does help you to get access to your top end if needed, or even just getting access to your Curlias. But the discarding is really what shines, because it synergizes with the deck so much. You are really incentivized to be able to discard those psychic energies, because you know that you could just use the Gardevoir to attach them to your Pokemon for free anyway once she's set up. So Ultra Ball plays double duty in being a consistency booster, as well as helping to set up our discard pile. I'm playing 1 Earthen Vessel. Similarly with the Ultra Ball, it allows you to discard a card from your hand to utilize, meaning that you can set up your discard pile with Psychics, but it lets you search the deck for 2 basic energy cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So if you need to get access to energies, this is one of the ways you can do so. I'm playing 1 copy of Night Stretcher. We're doing a lot of discarding, whether it's off of the refinement effect of Curlia or our Ultra Balls or even the Earthen Vessel. So there are going to be times where maybe you end up wanting to add one of those Pokemon or energies back to your hand. So Night Stretcher is nice to have if needed. I'm also playing 1, sorry about that. I'm actually playing 3 copies of Bravery Charm. They were just in different parts of the deck. So this is honestly what allows some of your Pokemon to really abuse the fact that they can have damage counters on them, because it increases the HP threshold by 50. So yeah, it's really not about making them like tankier so they can take hits. It's really just making it so that when you are ready to start attaching those damage counters, you will be able to maximize the amount of damage that you can do. I'm playing 2 copies of Rare Candy. Now this is obviously a deck that includes a Stage 2. However, as I mentioned, you don't necessarily always want to turbo immediately into your Gardevoir, because you actually want to utilize your Curlias to help sculpt your hand and provide consistency and card advantage. So the rare candies, while nice to have, are searchable, and you don't necessarily need to go into your Gardevoir right away anyway. It's just nice to be able to do so in a pinch. I'm also playing one switch cart, again, just another way that we can pivot towards getting some of the cards out of our active slot. I'm playing a Lost Vacuum, which is just a tech that allows you to essentially choose a Pokemon tool attached to any Pokemon or a stadium and put it into the Lost Zone. So this is really good at being able to get rid of some of our opponent's annoying tools. If you're going against Ancient Box, you definitely don't want to deal with their Ancient Booster Energy Capsules, for example, right? So there are plenty of strong tools that are in this game, and just having a Lost Vacuum in your back pocket is good to have. I'm also playing a counter catcher, which you can only use if you have more prizes than your remaining than your opponent. So essentially a comeback card that lets you switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active. So it's essentially a free boss's orders. So there are going to be times in which you are definitely going to be behind on the prize trade. You are playing a lot of weaker basic Pokemon, so there is a likelihood that many of them will get taken out by the time you are able to start setting up. So Counter Catcher is nice at ensuring that you have a free boss if you just so happen to find yourself behind in the game. I'm playing one Scoop Up Cyclone as my A-Spec of choice. Now, obviously, you're free to play Prime Catcher, which is a very powerful A-Spec and arguably the most powerful A-Spec in being able to give you access to a free boss's orders. I felt as though the Counter Catcher, since most of the time we may end up being behind a prize or two because of our weaker Pokemon, will come in a little bit more frequently than the Prime Catcher, that I thought I could just experiment with something a bit fun that my opponent will not anticipate. And Scoop Up Cyclone is that card, because it says simply put one of your Pokemon and all attached cards into your hand, meaning that it really is something that I want to utilize with my Gardevoir, since that 310 HP is actually nothing to scoff at. That is a lot of damage, so it may end up taking your opponent 2 hits to be able to knock it out. And you really don't want to lose the vital resources that may be underneath it, more specifically your Curlia and maybe even some energies that are attached, though that's not as imperative. It's really so that you could say if your opponent is trying to go for a Gardevoir knockout, you can go ahead and Scoop Up Cyclone, attach the Gardevoir, the Curlia, the entire line, so the Ralts as well as any of the energies that are attached to it, adding it back to your hand, essentially healing your Gardevoir so that now they are no longer within range for your opponent to be able to knock it out. And if you have another Ralts that was already established from the turn prior, you could go ahead and evolve right into another Curlia so that you can start to use its refinement ability. So I found as though it is a fun card to play, but by any means, feel free to play an A-Spec that works for you. For the tools, I am playing 2 copies of Technical Machine Evolution. This is so that we can get into our Curlias as fast as possible, because it gives the active Pokemon an attack, which for 1 energy lets you choose 2 bench Pokemon, and you get to evolve them essentially on that turn. So being able to set you up so that by the following turn, you have Curlias ready to go. So I love the TM Evolution, and it's searchable, so why not play it? And for my stadium, I am playing 2 copies of Artazone. Obviously, this isn't the most ideal to be able to go for. It's mostly to be able to take out our opponent's stadiums and knocking out their stadium so that we can establish our own. It's not the most ideal because obviously your opponent can utilize it. So it does let you search for a basic Pokemon and put it onto your bench. So, you know, all decks in the game are going to have some form of basic that they can utilize for that. So there are going to be moments in a pinch where you really do need to go for it, since we are playing a deck that is centered around so many basic Pokemon and so many different types of them. So I really only use it if I need to. But yeah, it's one of those cards that you can definitely swap out if for other techs if you're interested. For our supporters, I'm playing 4 copies of Arven, so this is really to take advantage of the fact that we are playing so many different types of item cards. It lets you search your deck for an item and a tool and reveal them and put them into your hand. So again, allowing you to sculpt your hand to find whatever it is that you need so that you can go ahead and either, set up your plays with your technical machine evolution with the tool there. You could use the tool search to go ahead and add your bravery charms. You can use the item search to add for any of the consistency cards that we're playing. So Arvin fits right at home in an item-based deck like this. I'm also playing 2 copies of Boss's Orders, even though we have the counter catcher. It's always nice to be able to have a guarantee just in case if we are up and we have taken more prizes than our opponent. So obviously our counter catcher will not be live if we just so happen to be ahead. I'm still checking a copy of Iono, just excellent disruption. Both players shuffling their hand to the bottom of the deck, and then we draw a card for each of our remaining prizes. So this is much more, the ideal scenario is to do this, obviously, if you are behind to help you catch up, because if your opponent has less prizes, that means less cards that they will draw. And I am choosing to play 3, 6, 9, 10 energy, which some people may say is a bit overkill, but I really don't mind being able to see it early on because, again, it's just discard fodder for the refinement or the ultra balls, and the faster you can get your discard pile loaded up with energies, the faster you will be able to start attaching them off of your Gardevoir's abilities. So guys, if you're still around up until this point, you're a real one. Thank you so much for taking the time to view my build. Hopefully you had the opportunity to learn something. If there's anything that you could take away, it's that these cards are busted. I'm certainly going to miss the Curlia with refinement when rotation hits, but I'm sure that the community will find a different way to be able to play this deck, even if it is on a more casual level. If you're fans of Pokemon content, I have other deck profiles, so definitely check out the Pokemon deck profile playlist that I have on the channel. And if you're fans of other types of card game content like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Digimon or the sort, definitely feel free to check out those playlists as well. This is Gamer Gage, and until next time, GG.